Hey gang, Bill Sheridan here, back with another CPA story to share with you this week. Hope you all had some great time off for the 4th of July, that you're back well rested, ready to get back at it, right? Another great story to share with you today. As I said, my guest is Savedra Scott. She's the owner of Savvy Financial Solutions. That's an outsourced accounting firm that provides services ranging from basics like accounts payable all the way on up to outsourced CFO work. And she's also currently secretary and treasurer of the MACPA's board of directors. That puts her on track to be MACPA chair during the 2026 27 fiscal year. So we're looking forward to that. Quite simply, Savedra was born to be a CPA, right? Accounting is in her blood, really, in her DNA. And it all started with, of all things, writing checks. Remember checks, those little paper things that we used to fill out when we had to give people money? I guess some of us still use those things from time to time, but that's old school. And that's where Savedra's accounting journey really began, way back when she was just a little kid. I'm going to let her explain, and pay attention here because there's a common thread starting to emerge in these stories. The purpose of CPA, it seems, all circles back to giving back, to helping others make a difference and change their world. Pretty cool how all that works, really. Here's Savedra Scott with her CPA story.
It was pretty much, I guess I was born with it. My name being Savedra, my grandfather from the South used to call me granddaughter.
Yeah.
And they were in Maryland visiting, and he said, "Granddaughter, come here." And so I sat on his lap, and he said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to write checks." "Well, what do you mean you want to write checks?" I was like, I want to write. I like to write checks. He said, "Okay, but who's gonna, give you money?" And I was like, "My dad." And he's like, "Well, okay, but what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, first I want to work at a grocery store, and then I want to work at a bank, and then I'm going to really just write checks all the time." And so, for whatever reason, being like 3 or 4 years old and having that conversation was basically the trajectory of like my life.
Oh, that's so funny.
It's the most random, probably not common type of situation, but it was just always a part of me. The mechanics of like writing a check, not knowing the background of it, you know what I mean? Or
Had
like
you
the cashiers like typing. That was like
had you actually written any checks at that point, or
no, but my mother says like when we used to go shopping that like I'd always say, just write a check. Just write a check. It's like check equated to money. She's like, we need to have money in the bank account, but okay, you know.
That's too funny. Your grandfather, did he what was his reaction? Did he kind of offer any advice or steer you toward anything that might kind of help you take that interest a step further? Or?
At that point, he just laughed at me because he thought it was hilarious that like my dad's going to give me money. But no, we always told the story, but never really like talked about it. And unfortunately, he died when I was 17. So he never got to see like, what I majored in college and, what I ended up becoming.
Did that so that interesting? Yeah, I mean that's a fantastic story. Did that translate as you got older? I mean, did that stick with you and kind of manifest itself into an interest in, a career where money was involved, or?
Always. For
Hmm.
whatever reason, I always liked money. Like, working at a bank seemed like fun. And I actually ended up working on the accounting side of a local community bank, as part of like my work history. I, I just, I just like the idea of organization and finality and starting and stopping something and having like a right answer and a wrong answer. I think that's probably more personality driven than anything else. And just like, kids, their parents say, go to college, go to college. It never was occurred to me that it was a choice. My parents didn't pressure me. It was always just the next step and the next step. And it was always just somewhere supplanted in my subconscious that that's what I wanted to be.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I just stuck with it.
That's fantastic. So when you started maybe studying accounting, and I'm not sure when that actually started, like high school or college, but uh, were, was what you were learning kind of sinking in and saying, "Oh yeah, I get this. This is where I need to be and grow and do."
1,000%. I started
Mhm.
taking accounting classes in high school as an elective. Um, I was a nerd, I guess. And my accounting teacher, we had the textbooks and we're learning about the general ledger and the trial balance, like all of like the basics. And I just loved it. I loved getting the homework. And before I did any of my other homework, I always did that one because it was just fun to me. Um, you know, moving forward, 20 plus years later, I talked to that accounting teacher and then she's like, you were always just good at it. Like, I just don't know why. She's like, but I also don't want you to think that like I was super smart. She's like, I was always a chapter ahead of you guys.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm not an accountant myself, but I did take some courses back in high school, and there was always something really um gratifying about seeing those seeing those debits and credits like line up, and it was just like, oh yeah, I did that, you know?
It,
It's like
it just, I don't know what it is. There's something about the way that it looked at the time that was like, oh, you add this number and you add this number and these things need to equal. Well, okay. Like, who would want to do this?
right. So what now that you've been doing this, and this is how you're making a living, what's the purpose or the why behind your work? What do you accomplish by doing what you do?
I specialize in service-based businesses and nonprofits. So I feel that it's at least a little bit a part of me that is giving back
Mhm.
to people in a way that, it's not necessarily financial, but it's helping them make better financial decisions so that they in turn can go and help other people. So I serve those who essentially serve others. And that's what gives me purpose. I mean, I could have probably got a corporate job and made, millions and millions of dollars, but this is kind of where I want it to be. I wanted to have my own business so I can make my own choices. Um, I didn't necessarily want someone to tell me what to do. And so having the part of being like a business owner and helping people really has just come full circle to like achieving my dream that I had like when I was 3 or 4 years old.
That's fantastic. I mean, helping others make the world a better place. I mean, that in essence is making the world a better place yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's
And you would think that like, how can an accountant do that? You're not a program manager or you're not, delivering things to the homeless, but I still feel like that's my way of giving back, doing something that like I care deeply about.
what's the most gratifying thing about what you do? What inspires you about your work?
I am the person that they call the Atta girl. Like getting a client acknowledgement is everything to me. It tells me that I'm doing a good job. Like I feel like I know that I'm doing a good job, but it's always that, oh, you see it too. You see my value. Um, that's what kind of helps me and helps, drives me to continue doing what I'm doing. I'm always looking for a new nonprofit like that I can help because like I want to know what their mission is. How can I help?
Hmm. Hmm. That's great. Um, so Savedra, if you were faced, say I'm a high school student or a college student who's kind of struggling to figure out where my fit is, what do I want to study, what do I want to do with my life? I mean, what would you tell me about accounting?
I would tell you that accounting is challenging, that everything that you learn in school is not necessarily what you're going to do out in the real world, but you will go further because you chose accounting and because you have that foundation. A lot of people that are not, taking the education route kind of are missing those fundamentals.
Mhm.
And so if you are detail oriented, you like to organize, you like things to match, and you also, to a certain degree, like cyclical work, I think that that is the best place for you to go. And we need more accountants. And for me, I try to be the fun accountant. I try to break the stereotypes of being a bean counter or only doing taxes. And what I tell my clients constantly is if you do not understand something, you need to tell me because that means I'm not doing a good job explaining it to you. Because me spitting out all these numbers to you and you nodding your head, it doesn't mean anything, right?
Mhm.
Because you're not absorbing what I'm telling you so that you can make good decisions. So
Yeah,
be different. Don't follow the norm of what an accountant should be.
and I tell people this story all the time. I was talking with an educator, um, worked for Oxford, I believe, actually, overseas. But he was telling me about some issues that his students were having, feeling that pressure of, oh, I've got to graduate and immediately go work for Big Four. And my family's expecting that, and they were like just completely stressed out about it. And it was obvious to this educator that that's not what they wanted to do, but they just felt like they had to. And through the course of having a conversation with them, he's like, all right, listen, forget about your studies, forget about what you're doing. What do you enjoy doing? Just what do you like to do in life? And he was talking with this one woman who was a student. She said, I really enjoy the outdoors. I like hiking. I like just being back to nature. And he said, well, companies like REI have accounting departments and they need good people like you, and his point was you don't have to tie yourself to any one thought or stereotype about what an accountant is. Everybody needs the work that we do, right? Yeah. And I think that's a really important point to take with us.
Yeah, I think that, if you are having some sort of pressure from family members, you feel bad if you don't necessarily adhere to like what they're saying. But if you still feel that way, I would strongly suggest that you do the work that you want to do with the type of clients that you want to work with, because maybe it could be a win-win situation. But also listen to your gut, and you can do what you want to do based on, what your family is telling you what to do. But I probably promise you that you're not going to be happy. And at some point in your life, you're probably going to go back to what you originally wanted to do that is just for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not to say that, life at the Big Four is not fulfilling in its own right, but there's something in this profession for everybody, right?
Literally,
Yeah.
literally. You do not have to do taxes all the time. You do not have to be an auditor and work busy season hours. You do not have to be an outsourced accountant and do what I do, or you do not need to work for a corporation. You can do whatever path you choose. There's so many paths that you can't even count them all. And if you just find something that feels good, try to explore that more, and then ask yourself, how can I be relevant?
Great stuff there from Savedra Scott. So glad she could take time out of her busy schedule to be with us here today. We want to hear from you too. So head on over to macpa.org/WHY and share your story with us as we try to offer a little bit of inspiration to the next generation of accounting and finance professionals. We want to hear what your CPA purpose is too. So help us out there if you got the time. We would appreciate it. And in the meantime, thanks for being here. We'll be back next week. More stories to share. Until then, have a great week, everyone. See you then.